And can we start just learning about community action for safe apartments and your work there?
But Community Action for Safe Apartments is a tenant organizing group, a community-based tenant organizing group here in the Southwest Bronx. We are based on Marcy Place, 35 Marcy Place, just below 170th Street and Jerome Avenue. We, I am a tenant leader in my apartment building. We have organized a tenant association, and there are about 13 similar tenant leaders who work with the staff at Community Action for Safe Apartments. And we decide based on the issues that we are facing and what we're hearing from our other members in our buildings and in the community, what types of campaign we want to fight to correct things that are particularly troublesome to us. A case in point would be in 2014, we decided that the courts were being used by the landlords to evict tenants and to collect money that the tenants did not owe the landlords. And we found that even when tenants had the right on their side, that they lost the cases in court because they had no legal protection. They did not know their own rights as tenants. And the lack of legal representation meant that even when they were right, they were still evicted or they were forced to pay money that they did not owe. Out of that campaign, one of our demands was for tenants to have legal representation in court. That led eventually to the right to counsel, which we all know provides free legal assistance to all tenants of rent stabilized apartments who are 200% or below of the federal poverty level. That they are entitled to free representation whenever they go to housing court facing eviction.
Now, CASA hasn't stopped their work through this COVID crisis. It's more important now than ever. It's always been important to protect tenant rights. But now there's a hashtag cancel rent campaign, and there's also the calling for the canceling of the rent guidelines board vote. What does that mean, and what do those petitions call for?
First of all, we have to say that New York is facing a crisis that it has never faced before. We have gone through other crises, yes, but this has the potential to be more devastating than anything that has ever been here in New York. As a result, we believe that the people who will suffer most are the most vulnerable in our communities already. Um, those who are living paycheck to paycheck, those who may not have sufficient income, barely enough to survive now, never mind with a loss of income. And we already see where tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers have already lost their jobs in this COVID-19 crisis. There are others who may be furloughed, they're home without pay, they have no source of income. We are calling for moratorium on rent, a cessation of rent, not where the rent is suspended today, but you'll have to pay it next month or 6 months later when the crisis is over. Because if you are not working, you surely are not going to be getting the money 6 months later from unemployment to pay your rent. It is not feasible, it is not possible. So, what we are calling for is for forgiveness of all rent and utilities that you accumulate during this crisis. And we are saying that there also should be a rent freeze because the monies you have now, whatever income you have, whatever resources you have left, should be for your daily living, for your food, for your necessary transportation, for the things that you have to do today to survive. It should not be for rent. Um, the mayor, as you said at the top of the program, has already agreed with the state's assistance to suspend the rent guidelines board hearings for this year, 2020. That would in effect be a rent freeze. It means that for 2020, all rents would be the same. The landlords must, in rent stabilized apartments, must offer a rent renewal increase so that tenants would have the same rent in the next year as they do have now. But that does not mean that landlords do not have the right as of now to go back and ask for the rents that have not been paid. We're saying that should not happen. That rent should be forgiven. Um, the state and the city has the means. All they need is the will to use their executive powers to cancel and forgive all rent and utilities to tenants who do not have the means of paying it. If we don't do that, the shelter system, as overloaded as it is already, will be totally would be considerably worse because there are a lot of people who are going to be evicted if they have to pay these thousands of dollars that they accumulate between now and the end of this crisis. That should not happen. It is important for the state and the city to come up with a policy immediately of how they're going to preserve the homes for those who have homes now and also protect the homeless. We have to provide homes for them too. Being out in the streets, they're even more vulnerable with coronavirus than they are before it. The health of the city and the longevity of the city are in the balance right now, and both the state and the city have to take action to provide homes for the homeless and to protect those who have homes right now and to forgive the rent and the utilities so that they use whatever resources they have available to them now to live and to survive and not to be fattening the already over bloated coffers of the landlords and the real estate industry.
Right, right. And now, speaking of evictions, can you please tell us about the eviction moratorium right to counsel and housing justice for all were able to win and what this means for tenants at this time?
What this means is if you do not have April's or May's rent, you should not worry. The courts are not accepting any eviction petitions or any petition from a landlord except or from a tenant, except for very serious cases like there's no heat or there's no hot water. If there's a major leak, let us say that is damaging the floors, which means that the ceilings may collapse because of the weight of the water or whatever. Yes, HPD would come in or the court will come in to give orders for the work to be done immediately because of the life-threatening situations that um, that brings up. But the courts are not going to be accepting any new cases or petition for eviction because you owe rent or even to collect that rent. Any case that's in court right now um, has been administratively adjourned through the end of April going into May so that the courts are closed. So tenants should not fear having to leave their homes to go to court. There's no court, and they will not be until further notice. The landlords, of course, are hoping that tenants don't know that, and they would use whatever harassing efforts they could come up with to try to threaten and bully landlords into paying rent. Sorry, bully their tenants into paying rent, which tenants should not do.
Mm.
We are also looking to have a rent strike, preferably collectively throughout the city, a citywide rent strike, because that is a tool that tenants can use strategically to force both the government and landlords to come to a reasonable resolution of our housing crisis in New York City. Um, New York State, New York City in particular, has a strong history of the tenant movement, of tenant organizing, and have had over the last maybe 200 years a series of rent strikes, which lay the foundation for the protections we have today in the laws in New York State and New York City that protect tenants. There's no reason for us not to continue that strategy. It can be used intentionally to make New York City a more welcome, a more inclusive place where those who do not have tremendous wealth can live just as well as those who have a whole lot of money. New York City has enough for all of us to be here, and we should not be displaced just because some of us don't have tremendous wealth in our pockets and in our bank accounts.
And Fitzroy, earlier we spoke about how the city is helping small businesses in terms of loss of wages or loss of income. How do you propose that they can also help landlords when it comes to this loss of income?
New York State and New York City has a very robust um, welfare system, commercial welfare system. They have been providing billions and billions of dollars to the real estate interest over the years. Um, they, through tax breaks, other tax incentives, through outright funding, the state and the city have made sure that the real estate industry has been doing very, very well. That is already in place. There's no reason why they cannot continue to use that to provide assistance to the landlords. But in particular, the small landlords, the larger landlords can weather the storm. They have tremendous reserves. They're not going to be hurt um, anyway close to how the smaller landlords can be hurt if this goes on for a very long time. But the city can forgive the rents of tenants, and they can use the same tax incentives, the same tax breaks, the same tax forgiveness that they've been offering to landlords to make them whole or to help them recover from this crisis that we're facing right now. Tenants, on the other hand, and the small business owners, they are a whole lot more vulnerable. And the city needs to have a policy, as I said earlier, right now, to come with a way that they can provide assistance to them. They need to be able to say, okay, we know you're hurting, but you're also protected from being evicted because you don't have your rent. Um, your employees, they're home. You may have to continue to pay their wages for a period of time. We understand that. So we are providing certain funding to allow you to be able to do that. Um, both the city and the state have to take action now because when this crisis is over, it's going to take a long time for the city to dig itself out of the economic hole and to come back to what New York is. It means that efforts have to be made now. It has to be started now to make it easier for us to climb out of that hole when this crisis is over. It's not something that is going to happen magically overnight. It's going to take a long time. The more we can help now is the lesser the effort would be to climb out. We would not have as far out to climb to begin to on the road to recovery.
Unfortunately, we're running out of time, but just one more thing, Fitzroy. Can you please just give a message to those worried Bronxites who fear that they can't make rent this month?
Yeah, what I would like to say is that no one should be displaced or should have to go into deep depth because they can't pay their rent or their mortgage. Um, we did not speak in the few minutes we had about the homeowners who have mortgage payments to make. Our demands are that they are also covered. They're given the same protections as the renters, so that they should have mortgage forgiveness and that they should not be prey to the banks who already stole so many homes and that caused this big crisis in 2008. Um, they should not be losing their homes or face the threat of losing their homes simply because of this crisis and they're not working and not having the funds and not having the ability to pay their mortgages. Right? We are saying that the eviction moratorium is a first step. It is a good first step, but what we need is a suspension of rent and an automatic and a universal forgiveness of any rent, mortgage, or utility payment accumulated during the length of this crisis. We are working through our various coalitions to make sure that Albany and City Hall come up with these policies almost immediately. We have not heard anything from the governor's office about whether or not they're going to be canceling the rent guidelines board. The city has said he's willing to suspend it, but it needs the state's okay. The governor has not commented on that. We don't know how much money he is offering to assist the small business owners, um, to protect them from being evicted if they don't pay their rents. We don't know what he is doing to help the people who really need the most help. Um, so we are saying that New Yorkers need to band together now more than ever. There are a series of events that are happening that we should all know about and we should participate in as much as possible. One of them is that there's going to be a tenant town hall, a virtual tenant town hall this Thursday, April 2nd, where we are going to be discussing what is happening, what it means, what we can do going forward, and how all tenants around the city can become involved in the petitions that are going to Albany and to City Hall to bring relief to us now and to help us as we go forward, when this crisis has ended.
Thank you so much again, Fitzroy Christian, Community Action for Safe Apartments leader, for your time today and for giving this wealth of knowledge to our viewers. Be sure to attend that virtual town hall April 2nd, correct?
Yes, it is April 2nd, 6 to 7:30 p.m.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Viewers, make sure also to follow at Casa Bronx on Instagram to keep up to date. Open BxRx. We'll be right back.